Hey, this is Ramon Channels Alpha 4, and we're going to get to chapter 19, Sodom and Gomorrah. This video is going to be a little rough, so there's nothing I can do about it. It's a rough topic this time. So there's your trigger warning for those who need that kind of thing. Here are the events of Sodom and Gomorrah. The sparing of Lot, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's rescue, Abraham witnesses, and then you get, as was promised in the previous chapter, the origin of the Moabites and Amorites. What is Sodom and Gomorrah? It is an example of total judgment. They are destroyed. That's the two cities. They just are. Now, why is this story in the Bible? Well, I hinted in the previous chapter, in the previous video, that perhaps they were doing horrible things to violate guest friendship laws, and a king sent knights to investigate. The knights discovered, the warriors, knights meaning warriors here, discovered that the accusations were true, and as ancient warriors would do in such cases, they destroyed the city and burned it to the ground, and that was it. But there are tons of explanations. For instance, an earthquake or a meteor shower. Did a real Sodom and Gomorrah exist? There have been findings of Sodom and Gomorrah, but there are multiple sites that have been claimed to be Sodom and Gomorrah. So I don't know if there's an official one. At least that's been the last time I looked it up. Maybe they found an official one since then. But towns were destroyed by fire through a king being upset with a city. So this kind of thing did happen. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. Lot, on the other hand, when the investigators, when these angels come into town, demonstrates correct guest friendship rights, while the city does not. And when the whole town, when all the men of the town, this means above the age of 15, in a town of maybe 1,000, so you're talking about half the population, so you're talking about like 500 men, who knows, show up in front of his doorstep asking for the visitors. He then offers his daughters as a sacrifice to protect his guest. Now, that might sound extreme to you, but let's break it down just a little bit. First off, it shows that virginity was highly valued in the ancient world. So that's number one, because he presents that as part of the offer. It also shows that guest friendship laws and rules were more valuable than property value. Yes, I'm saying that he thought of his daughters as property, or at least as their virginity as property. But the Bible also says that his daughters were married. So if they were married, he was completely lying about them being virgins. Not that that justifies anything, but I'm just saying that what he's saying has multiple levels. Okay, now, as I said, the community is not a super large community. So depending on when you think this story happened, there's a probable size for how large the cities were. So if this happened at around 2600 BC, there's probably about 6,000 people in the city. If, on the other hand, this happened at around 1000 BC, you're talking about 40,000 people in the city. If this happened at around 1000 BC, you're talking about 40,000 people in the city. There's not a bunch of cities in the world. Most places are hamlets or villages or small communities. A hamlet is basically what we would consider a neighborhood. And the cities that are densely populated are not that densely populated, okay? But to give you an idea of populations, Jericho had a population of about 2,000. Ur had a population of about 6,000. Susa had a population of about 8,000. Athens had a population of about 10,000. And Mycenae had a population of about 20,000. So these are not super huge populations the way we would understand it today. Even my small town has a population of over 100,000. All right, so then let's talk about the destruction. So as I said, it's supposed to have happened in just one day. Well, why was the town destroyed? I've already hinted at my idea that it was about violation of guest friendship laws and rights. But what does the Bible and what do commentators actually say about this? Well, there's actually a pretty straightforward agreement on this, and it's not the one reason that everybody thinks. Here's what they think happened. They think the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah are mistreatment of the poor, lack of social justice, immorality, violation of the sacred duty of hospitality, that's guest friendship laws, and rape. Not homosexuality, rape. That was their crime. They were raping strangers that passed through the town. That's a horrible thing. If that was happening today, if there were cities that were doing that to travelers, you better believe, the National Guard, the military, you better believe that every single law enforcement agency in the world would be there to stop this, okay? A city like that, even today, would be eradicated and everyone would be arrested if that was happening. The angel said, grab your family and let's go. So he goes to tell his family, and like Cassandra in the Iliad, no one believes him. They laugh at him. So basically, Lot is like, well, I don't know what to do. So the angels say, well, then you just take your daughters and leave. Leave the in-laws and everybody else. Take your daughters, take your wife, and get out of here. But Lot is a coward, and he won't go. So they have to save him. They have to pull him out. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means to me that one does not need to be brave to be saved. Let me say that again. One does not need to be brave to be saved. Even a coward can be saved. And there's going to be little morals like this throughout the Old Testament. Then Lot's wife, as they're escaping, looks back, turns into salt. What's that about? So I disagree with the assessment that Lot's wife is used as a way to explain the existence of salt pillars, as the way that Greek and Roman myths explain the way things are. I think the lesson here is more of a moral. It is more instruction than explanation. The instruction here is obey completely no matter what. If God says to do something, you obey completely. That's the lesson here. Lot then gets away, and he leaves his wife behind. He doesn't look back. They go to a small city. So, at the small town actually, they decide that they're not safe there, so they leave to the cave. Now, why is that important? Because everybody makes the same statement that's completely incorrect. That Lot's daughters thought there were no other men around. There were no other men of their family around of marriage material. Not there were no other men. There were no men worthy of marriage to them. So there's incest that happens there with two different daughters. And there is a type of rape that happens because they get him drunk and they sleep with him without his knowledge. So how they would even know this, how other people would know this when telling the story, who knows? Look at it two different ways. You can look at it as the corruption in Sodom and Gomorrah was so deep that they could not escape that corruption. But you can also look at it as a way of the writer and storyteller of the story to ridicule and condemn as a condemnation against the later neighbors of the Israelites in the Transjordan, namely the Amorites and the Moabs, who are supposed to be Lot's descendants by his two daughters. You see? So it's a way to kind of like jab at them to be like, you guys might be tough, but you guys are descendants of incest. We're not. We're pure. Which, yeah, right. One more philosophical way to look at this is that the corruption of the two cities was so complete and infected Lot's daughter so much that it was inescapable. So really everyone should have been killed, except for maybe Lot. But, he needs to have descendants as well. And this is important for today, because you got to think about how Adam and Eve, their children could not escape, their descendants cannot escape their sin. Cain's descendants cannot escape his sin. So too, Lot's daughters could not escape the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. So even though they were untouched by the men, those two cities corrupted them. And that corruption continued on through their descendants. So this is important for today because contrary to a lot of people, to what a lot of people believe, no matter how much you try to forget or deny or destroy the past, you cannot escape it. Tearing down statues doesn't set you free, okay? Because tearing down statues and trying to forget history doesn't mean history didn't happen. It still happened. No matter how much you wish your ancestors didn't do something, whether it's worshiping something that you consider false gods, or whether it's owning slaves, or whether it's being sexist, or whatever the horrible thing that was done, it was done, and it's part of you. Their genes that did those horrible things are part of you. Your genes, your genetics go back into those people. Those genes live in you. You cannot escape that what they did is part of you. And the culture that they built is part of you as well. The culture that we live in now is a result of their influence, regardless good or bad. Okay? So you cannot get away from that. And I know a lot of people want to, but at the same time you can't escape it. It's part of us. Our past is part of us, and what our ancestors did is part of us. Whatever happened in the past happened. And it's why we exist today. Now, on that note though, while Lot's wife was punished for looking back, Abraham was allowed to look on from his distance. So it is possible to be able to look at something like that, given enough distance, to be able to learn from it, to be able to witness it, to be able to know that something happened. So whatever Lot's wife was doing when she turned around, it was more than just looking back. Anyway, that is chapter 19. This is going to take some editing. Peace, like, love, subscribe, comment down below. Yes, I said love. Later.